Okay, welcome everyone to a new episode of the Zero to Play podcast. I'm your host, Carla Duke, and today I'm joined by Tim Knauf and Joe Raeburn. Tim and Joe are both veterans of the gaming industry, and last year they announced 2UP Games. It's a Supercell-backed mobile gaming studio that's focused on building the next generation of mobile co-op games. So today I'll be talking to them about this new chapter with 2UP, the state of mobile games in the industry, and I also want to ask about remote work and being in New Zealand and how that affects the journey that they're on. And we'll see where else the conversation goes as well. So thanks for joining me today, Tim and Joe. I really appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks, Carl. To be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so Joe, you're actually in Auckland right now, and Tim, you're in Wellington. And I think that's an interesting story in itself is that you guys are in different cities, and that's going to be a challenge that you guys overcome. But before we get to kind of the 2UP journey, I'd love to ask you guys, this could probably drag on for hours, but just your first job in the gaming industry and what that experience was like. So we can start with you, Joe. What was your first job that you entered into the gaming industry, and speak a little bit on that?
So I was finishing up at university, and what I really wanted to do was write music for video games. So I completed 2 degrees, one in mathematics and one in music composition. And I had a little miniature CD together and a business card, and I wanted to get a job. And as lots of people know, as lots of audio people know in New Zealand, there's a lot of people making audio for games, and the industry, it isn't that large. And this is even more so 20 years ago. So, but I met some people at this industry conference kicked off, and this like little industry event organized in Wellington. And I met someone who said, I'm starting a game studio, maybe you can come and work with us. And I said, that sounds cool. I'm fresh out of uni. What I found out over time is starting a game studio with no funding, but with the idea of getting some someday. So this company taught me a lot about games, and it taught me a lot about business. We started making a game based on the downloadable game called Dope Wars, which was popular at the time. There wasn't such a thing as like play in the browser games. This was download with your browser and play on your PC. We wanted to make a game like that. And as we were making this Dope Wars clone with a slightly more interesting theme that I don't really want to go into because it's a bit shameful now, it became apparent that while we had a couple of people who could program and some people who could make 3D art, pre-rendered 3D art, no one knew how to bring a game together. And I'm like, well, these 21 years, I guess 16 years of playing games since I was 5 years old, this is all gonna pay off now. So I started making a spreadsheet like I did for so many things in life, figured out what the scenes were, what we needed to do, how many cards the game needed, how many special abilities, what the currencies were in the game. And then people started listening to me, and we had a design for the game, and we started to make progress forwards. And we're just getting this momentum up when it became apparent that this studio was never going to get funding. And we wound it up amicably. And just as we were winding this up, we were at Creative HQ, the business incubator in Wellington, part of this first intake. And people next to us were a pretty awesome company called Cultureflow. One of the first companies promoting the use of te reo Māori like everywhere, including in government departments. It's a big thing now, but not so much 20 years ago. They said, hey, you know how to make games? And I'm like, sort of. We've had a crack at making one and we didn't finish it, but yeah. And they're like, can you make us a game that helps people learn and revise te reo Māori? And I'm like, I guess I can't really speak it, but I can learn at the same time. And so I went from my first unpaid job to my first paid job. Cool. By like moving one cubicle over in Creative HQ, which I guess shows how awesome those business incubators are. And that was my first paid project and first shipped project, where got a small team together, raised funding, sold some positive in-game advertising, say to Smoke Free or Wahikore, which means like smoke free in the game, and shipped the product. And I was like, this is kind of awesome, and I kind of want to do this, and I like getting teams together, and I like shipping things. And I thought I was going to be the disorganized creative type, sitting up late wearing a beret, no, I mean a toupee, when in fact I was in the front lines wearing a beret, saying like, let's get this game done. So I guess that was the start of my career in game production and getting things made.
Wow, that's crazy. It's amazing how 20 years ago the industry didn't really exist, but it was kind of grassroots. It still kind of exists today, but I feel like there's definitely a bit more of an industry and a streamlined path that you can go and see a career. So that's really cool to hear that 20 years ago that kind of thing happened, that spark happened. Awesome. And Tim, what was your first job in the gaming industry?
So yeah, I had this experience where 8-year-old Tim had a much better idea of what he wanted to do than 20-year-old Tim. I think, like, I remember a woman coming around class in primary school and asking us what we each wanted to do, and I said, yeah, I want to be a computer programmer, and in my mind that was like programming games. But fast forward, I think at the start of the 2000s, it was feeling like, oh, the days of small teams and games are done. There's the bedroom coders have died out. Even small teams were going away, and it seemed at that point to me that that everything was just like these enormous teams where you would be this tiny cog. And of course, we do have those these days, but this, as we know now, there's been this whole renaissance of small to medium-sized teams where you can make a big contribution on a number of different elements of a game. So I kind of knew in my heart that's what I wanted to do, and I'm like, oh well, I can't do that, and I didn't. But coming at the end of uni, I actually did music diploma there as well, like similar story to Joe, and thought that I would do something with music. Started working on this point and click adventure game just for my own amusement. It's like, oh yeah, making the music for this is easy. This programming stuff it's really hard, but I'm kind of loving it. Like this is awesome. And so 3 years of my free time went into that, and I finally released it 2005, I think it was, and through a friend of a friend. So I just released that as freeware, which was, what it was called then. Through the friend of a friend, I met up with a guy, Tristan Clark, who had just released a game, PC downloadable game. This was the era that it was, called Fashion Star, which was like right at the bleeding edge of what we would now call casual games, which I hadn't really even heard of before meeting him. But we hit it off immediately. We were both interested in games with strong characters and stories, and we could see, oh yeah, you've completed a game. You've completed a game. There's no like doubt that either one of us is going to flake out. It was like the second era of Flash games at that point, where we were just blown away. We're like, oh, okay, we'll make these games in Flash, and people just give us money for that. Like, oh, you can be handed money for like a lump sum, because it was the era of Flash portal sites where they would pay, they would pay some amount of money depending on the quality of the game, and but then along comes the iPhone App Store, and we're like, oh, we'll just spend a couple of months just banging out a real quick puzzle game for iPhone. It was the era of most of the games on the App Store were cheap. There was no in-app purchases or anything at that point, and we sold our game for $1, and just managed to strike a time where the game got some promotion on the App Store, and we got this sum from Apple that we're like, cool. Oh my goodness, like we can just quit our day jobs and go do this full time. And in retrospect, it was not nearly enough to to really do that if you were taking a good, hard, sober look at everything. But that was what formed the basis of the company for us.
Cool.
So
was this Launching Pad?
this was Launching Pad Games, yeah.
Cool.
So and we managed to find an amazing artist, James Ellis, and so that was the three of us, that company size. And while we never had a big hit, we did manage to release like quite a lot of games, and I'm really proud of all of them. So that was if ever I had thought, oh, games, you can only ever just be a tiny cog in a games making machine, like that completely disabused me of that. That was probably the formative development experience for me, just all wearing a lot of hats. And that's why it's so exciting to be back in a startup like 2UP.
That's cool.
It's a wonderful thing. Yeah.
And especially in New Zealand, the New Zealand game development industry is doing great with those small teams. I mean, there are a few big companies that bring in a lot of money, but there's some small teams as well that are doing amazing with just a handful of people. So that's really promising, and I think fits perfectly in the kind of New Zealand ecosystem. There's a ton of really good talent here. So when I was researching you guys, Joe, I saw that you were affiliated with EA in London. Is that one of the experiences you had? Can you talk a bit on that and what working in a different country and what the gaming industry was like there, and what the game development industry was like with the kind of community?
Yeah, for sure. So and that's going to tie back nicely into Tim's story with Tristan. Remember this guy, Tristan Clark. He's going to be an important figure in the later part of this journey.
Cool.
I arrived in London, and I should probably say that after shipping this language learning game, which was pretty awesome, I didn't go on to work in games after that. I worked in analytics, and then later at Kiwi Bank, making mobile phone banking. So we made a new way that you can bank on your mobile phone and your iPhone. And I thought one day I'd get back into apps or games. And I was in London when I arrived. Classic, go with my now wife, who was then girlfriend. Let's go overseas for a couple of years. And when I first arrived, I'm like, what are the gaming companies here? Because it'd be awesome to work in games. And I applied with these guys, Playfish, which is one of the Facebook pioneers. He's like one company that started it all and one company that made even more money. So Playfish was the one that started it all. They made Restaurant City, Who Has the Biggest Brain, Pet Society, and eventually The Sims Social. Zynga were in America, and they did even better with games like Farmville and Cityville. But Playfish, these are the guys, masters at social games, and I'm like, I'll apply there. They seem to be talking about using data to make games, which was a brand new concept at the time, and I'm pretty deep on data, and maybe I can help. Didn't hear anything back from them for nearly a year, until one day someone called me up and said, like, are you happy at your current job? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, you don't sound happy. When you come work for us at Playfish, it's awesome. And so I went along. This was my first experience of a well-run social gaming studio, about 100 people. And I just met 5 people over a period of 4 hours where they all grilled me. And I'm like, these are potentially the smartest people I have ever met in a professional sense.
Wow.
I must work at this company. I don't know if it's going to be possible, but they offered me a job, and they said, come work as a product manager on one of our games, Restaurant City. You might like it. It's very popular. It's got about 3 million DAU. And at this point, I'm like, what's a DAU? How do you measure it? It's like DAU is daily active users. That's how many people log into this game every day. And I'm like, 3 million people.
That's crazy.
Play this restaurant game made in Flash every day. And that's what I'm yelling in my head really loudly, but I'm like, gotta keep cool, because like, I really want to work here. And so I'm working on this game, Restaurant City, really rapidly learning all these industry terms that are standard now, but like there was no deconstructor of fun back then. There was core loop. You'd like type that into Google and it would probably have like an apple with its core cut into a circular shape. Yeah. You know, these were new terms. So we're like right at the edge of of social games and trying to make things that people want to play. So we had this experience of creating content for people who knew what they wanted from a restaurant game. And what they wanted was ways to decorate their restaurant and show it off to their friends and go and visit different friends every day. So like classic social game. And it was absolutely amazing. Like,
Cool.
I loved it. Dived into like, what's the tutorial funnel? Where are people falling off? How much currency do we see people at the start of this game versus our competitors? So how many things can you buy? All these different ways of looking at games that I'd never even thought of, but it was just standard practice there. So these guys at Playfish had about a year before I joined been acquired by EA, and there was a very staunch set of Playfish loyalists who really didn't like the EA way, and there were people like me who were joined going like, EA's awesome, they've got lots of marketing power, like they're this great behemoth to have behind you where anything can be possible, and they have an amazing stable of brands. So I was both like, love Playfish in my heart, love EA, not quite as much, but still a lot, and got to go through the experience of when we launched this game, The Sims Social. So this was taking PC game The Sims and bringing it onto Facebook, and that game was immense and big, and had some exciting times where you were able to virtually date people in this game. And where you have your life where you're really dating someone and you're virtually dating someone else, and how that ties into office politics. It'll get very exciting. So yeah, got deep into this world of social games, which was only really a Facebook thing. And when people think about Facebook games, probably the first thing that comes to mind is like the lost cow on Farmville, you know, all of those annoying posts to the Facebook social channels. And that was certainly a part of it, but as well as that, these are really the first games as a service that exist in the world, like especially in the West. And so that games as a service, like, how do I keep people entertained for years? It's the same thing that, say, Grinding Gear games are doing right now with Path of Exile. It's about knowing your players, understanding what content they want, and then delivering it to them and going past their expectations. So that there on Restaurant City, that's where I learned my games as a service chops, and it's something I firmly believe in. Like, the annoying virality stuff of Facebook has gone away, but listening to your players and keeping them entertained and giving them what they want, that's something that I think will always be a part of me and always be a part of like my game making journey.
That's so cool. That and no doubt that will be invaluable experience to for the 2UP games release and future. So that's really cool to hear. Tim, I wanted to go back to you because you had experience, or you worked at Magic Leap for upwards of 6 years, right? I understand. And going into AR, working on a new platform, that must have been a big shift. And I'd love to know just quickly what that experience was like in terms of the gaming industry as a whole, and kind of where you thought AR would be 6 years on from when you started, and where it currently is now from your understanding, and then why you left, or not left, but why you're choosing to go back into the kind of startup and mobile space.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So after we finally decided with Launching Pad that we were not making enough money to be viable, we sadly packed that up, and I worked for another couple of mobile focused companies for a bit, and then through a friend heard about this opportunity that was this very incredibly mysterious opportunity that was happening at Weta, out of Weta Workshop, and had an interview there, wherein they told me practically nothing, the technology, except that there was some incredibly exciting technology that, you know, for all the concrete details I had, it was like, this could be time travel for all I know. That this is, but I was so intrigued, and then when I found out what Magic Leap were wanting to do, well, yeah, found out I would be employed by Magic Leap under this arrangement, and they were collaborating with Weta Workshop on this mysterious project, and then found out what they were wanting to do, which we now know is you put on some glasses and you can see like essentially holograms wherever you look, and they're completely stable and integrated with the real world. But this tech didn't actually exist in that form then, and in fact for my first 6 months it was sort of all hypotheticals. There weren't even consumer VR headsets out then. This was 2013. But like the thrill of being part of something that was completely new in the world, and like I love stories about the development of especially things like the Amiga in the 80s, where they had it at trade shows and it was a bunch of breadboards all connected by cabling at the back. There was a lot of that spirit with early Magic Leap, and so I got to have a trip over there and use what they called the Beast, which was anything but portable. But it was a I'm not sure if you ever got to see the Beast, Carl.
No, I didn't. No. By the way, just for context, Tim and I worked. I went down to Wellington for a few months and worked as a QA tester on Dr. Grodbort's. That's how I met Tim and how this was arranged. Yeah, just this context. I never went to Florida or to America, but you say that you went and saw that?
Yeah, so it was something that you sat your head in rather than putting on your head, and so just completely stationary. But they had this technology that it went on to form part of the Magic Leap kind of secret sauce, as it were, like that things appeared at their right focal depth, which is something that even VR headsets now don't have. So something that's just a few inches from your face, it would look like it was right there, just a few inches from your face. And so we had I think we had some robot models that we had scaled down to insect size, and they just looked magnificent. And I think that was when I really drank the Kool-Aid. I was totally into this. Then, as we all know, the miniaturization of that technology, and especially turning it into something where you could like turn your head and everything remains stable and it understands where it's looking in the room. That took a long time because there's a lot of hard problems to solve. But for me, it was always a thrill to be part of that, of something that's completely new in the world coming into existence. And I still really believe in that technology in a general sense, even though probably it turns out where the world, that technology is quite a long way from something that would be like comfortable enough to use and cheap enough for consumers to use. So, and then coming back to your original prompt, talking to Joe after Magic Leap decided that they were no longer going to focus on consumer software of any stripe, was introduced through, it's Tristan Clark again. Tristan Clark remotely introduced me to Joe and said, hey, you guys should talk. And then talking to Joe and just hearing his ambition, like there are some ambitious Kiwi game devs, but when like an example would be when we were talking to investors about the idea later on, and I would say to the investors, oh yeah, I'm looking forward to my games that I work on having millions of players, and Joe would take me aside afterwards and say, Tim, you've got to stop saying millions, hundreds of millions, like think big. And so that ambition, because coming off Magic Leap, I'm so proud of what we produced. Like Dr. Grodbort's Invaders was intended to be like the killer app as far as games went on Magic Leap, and as far as I'm concerned, we succeeded. Like we made the Halo of Magic Leap. But with the headset having limited availability and high cost, looking at the amounts of players that we actually had, which and people loved that game, but I'm so excited to be coming back into making games that many people can play, and that that my cousins will play, or heck, maybe even my parents. You never know. They're not big gamers, but and just being able to say to someone, yeah, it's on the App Store, go download it, rather than, oh, you need one of these headsets. And I think that's a really thrilling thing with coming back to mobile, is the democratization of gaming that mobile has done. It's just like everyone plays games now. It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Gaming has now fused with society. It's not a thing that's just for kids anymore. It's a lot more respected and mainstream. So that's really cool to see. Just before we talk about 2UP Games and that kind of chapter of your journey, for going back to Magic Leap, is there one now that you've left? Is there like one frontier that that you think needs to happen for AR to get to the next phase of its experiences? That's what I'm just curious about. If like you've kind of stepped away from that, but is there something that you're hoping to see in the next year, 5 years, 10 years that you think will be that next step for that to become more democratized?
I think that unfortunately the challenges with like head-mounted mixed reality or AR, there's multiple ones, and this is part of like what the challenge that Magic Leap had from the get-go, and also Microsoft with HoloLens, is that I think it'll need to get a wider field of view. It'll need to get smaller, like comfortable enough that it almost feels like just putting on a regular pair of glasses, and it will have to get like 5 times cheaper. So unfortunately there is a bit of a still now, I think, boiling the ocean kind of thing, and sad though it made me for Magic Leap to step away from consumer products. I think it's probably is a good call in the short term, while the technology matures, more miniaturization gets done, more research into the physics of getting a good field of view, and just getting everything down to a price level that consumers can accept. And I think there's wonderful potential for this in all kinds of industries, sure, but like as a entertainment product as well, because I feel like I've seen the future, and it is fun and exciting.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So now, I'd love to go deep into 2UP. So because Joe, you had experience, or you had ties with Supercell. Supercell funded or helped fund the project. I'm really curious for you guys to explain co-op and why that's such a core part of the company. I mean, it's even in the title. So I'm wondering why you guys have kind of chosen that. I wouldn't say pigeonholing, but it's definitely it's establishing kind of one of the core mechanics of the games that you guys are going to produce. So if you guys could talk a little bit more on that, why are you guys so passionate about co-op gaming, and what do you see in terms of the value of it?
Yeah, there's quite a few paths that lead to coalescing and co-op for us. So part of it is a shared experience with co-op games. So when we first started talking, Tim and I, we talked about co-op games like Overcooked, and both of us had experiences with our wives playing this game. So I remember it took my wife and I like 4 sessions to beat the final boss, the spaghetti monster, and it's tough. Like the spaghetti monster has this a few phases, but you don't know whether you've completed the first phase in time to be able to beat it in the 4th phase. So there were times where it felt like our relationship was getting a little bit rocky while playing this, and we set the controllers down and said, we need to have some chocolate to refresh, and maybe we can make it. My wife's cousin's there watching us, like hooked whether we can beat this spaghetti monster. And we eat the chocolate and we go back and just everything is perfect and we're playing in sync and we absolutely smash it with like a minute and a half to go still on the clock, and just feel this warm glow that we've achieved something together. And it's intense, and that we probably don't want to play another co-op game later. We played A Way Out, and that game was amazing up until the ending. Ending's not a great thing to play with your wife if she's not used to like dual stick controls, which is a real barrier to co-op, and another lesson that I've taken with me. But those forms of couch co-op experiences, they're really intense and they're short-lived, and then they're done. Mm-hmm. So what I wanted to do is have something more where we make games that you can connect with people that you care about, but on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. So like seeing friends at the office play co-op Clash Royale, for example, when they had a lunch date, it's like, we're going to play every day at lunch, we can play a co-op game. And they enjoyed that. And it became a social thing between two people who were colleagues, and I saw them slowly become friends over a bonded experience of playing Clash Royale together.
Cool.
But what we wanted was not something where you go and take on other people. Like there are lots of PvP games and lots of team games, like League of Legends is a great game for bringing people together. But we wanted that experience of two people coming together to overcome shared adversity. Mm-hmm. So how can we do that? But how can we do it in a mobile way? And that mobile way seemed like a really difficult challenge for a number of reasons. First being, like, as anyone who makes mobile games knows, retention is key. Like if you wanted to know one stat to determine if a game is going to work or not, it's retention, and especially long-term retention. Mm-hmm. And if you're looking and saying like, hey, for this game to be really successful, we need to have north of 25%, hopefully north of 35% day 7 retention, then simple fact is you need to be playing this game 4 times a day. You do. And most co-op experiences, even that lunchtime Clash Royale experience, that's not retaining enough for someone to form a pattern and turn this game into this hobby that you play repeatedly. And so that a third of the people you get in the door are still playing it a week later. It's a tough challenge. So how can we make a mobile co-op game that you can play whenever you want to play it? So you log in and just say, play a game, and it brings in a partner. And you're like, cool, I can play this game with a stranger. And we don't want text chat, and we don't want voice chat. Both of them are problematic. So how can you play this game with a stranger where you're able to communicate effectively within the game systems, and still have this experience that brings you closer together as humans? And if we can solve that, then it can work for friends who are remote, and it can work for friends who are together. Another thing that was happening, of course, is right at this point, we're deep in lockdown. Yeah. So this ability to connect with family is something that I really wanted to have. Like we would, at Christmas with our extended family, we'd come together and we'd play cards. And when we played cards, partly it was about the game. And yeah, sometimes I got a bit competitive, but it's also this shared social experience. And we were having the opposite of that. Like we could talk remotely on video, but we couldn't play together or like do really fun things together. And I'm like, you know what? If Draw Something had come out right now, then it would be amazing. I'd get to see my friends and my family drawing things on the screen, and we could interact with it, and I can guess what they have, and together we would have achieved something. So there was this drive for all sorts of connection of strangers, connection of friends and family who are separated by distance for whatever reason, be it a pandemic or just someone going off to go to university, and people who are in the same space. And this felt like an awesome challenge to solve, especially combining with like 4 sessions a day, great day 7 retention. And there was nothing like that out there. And I felt there should be, because that feels like a really hard problem to solve, a really interesting problem to solve, and no competition. And so I'm like, there should be a company like this. Someone should make a company focused on mobile co-op games. And I'd been on a journey trying to figure out what I was doing next. I'd only been back in New Zealand for about 6 months, looking at various roles that I could work in, and none of them seems to have the degree of ambition or the degree of challenge around what I wanted to do next. And yeah, all of those things came together. And I think it really came, and I'm considering this, and I'm reading this book called Homo Deus by Harari, the guy who wrote Sapiens. And I'm reading it, and I get to this chapter about humans, and it's like, are humans just like bullies who bully around other species? He's a vegan, and there's a big section on that. But then he gets diving into the more positive qualities of humanity, and he starts talking about cooperation is humanity's superpower. This is what's made us the dominant species. This is what's brought aeroplanes and going to space years and years ago, and the internet, our ability to cooperate. And it's our fundamentally human quality that is our superpower. And I'm like, cooperation is humanity's superpower. So why do we seem to suck at it so much right now? Like, I just come back from Brexit happening in the UK, the era of US politics, which is coming to a close right now, which is great, but people hunkering down in the pandemic and not doing a particularly good job in most places. But in New Zealand, us being this team of 5 million and doing really well and feeling like we can cooperate and we can beat it, and it's actually working. And I'm reading it and I'm feeling it in my bones that cooperation is humanity's superpower. But just like any muscle, or just like anything that we do, maybe we need practice at it, and practice should be fun. Mm-hmm. So what if we took this idea around that experience I had with my wife playing Overcooked and feeling this, we've worked together to overcome adversity, but what happens if it's not just two of us who own consoles who found time to sit together in the same place, but hundreds of millions of players around the world having this experience, and there's only one platform where you can do that. Like there is, and it's mobile. Yeah. So what if we can provide intrinsically motivated cooperation practice for humanity? And I'm like, that feels like something that I want to get out of bed every day and do. And if we focus on that goal, everything else follows. Like if we can focus on having a high number of users, of course the company will be successful. Of course it sets us on track to have a game or a suite of games that's as big as the entire New Zealand games industry right now. Because it's about $400 million a year right now. Yeah. And that's really just one good game. Yeah. For example, this guy, Tristan, who introduced us, he worked on a game for King. I introduced him to the team at King in London, and they made Farm Hero Saga. That game made more than $400 million in 1 year, right? Yeah. It's bigger than the entire size of the New Zealand games industry. Crazy. So it's the level of ambition we have. I love it. But it starts with fun cooperation practice for the largest number of people that we can possibly reach, and that's our mission as a company. It's pretty simple, really.
That's cool. I love it. And I think what sticks out to me the most, what I'm most excited to see on you guys' journey, is that you're trying to step away from the trend of game mechanics that involve violence and PvP, and which is one of the biggest trends, and the most popular games inherit those game mechanics. But I love that you're bringing into the conversation of like, what does that mean for society? Like, if we're constantly going against each other, and sure, it might make a more intense and I guess blood-curdling experience, but you're really trying to focus on things that bring people together and make people work together, and that's a really fascinating angle to take. And I'm really excited to see what kind of game mechanics you guys develop that are different and new, and that are still just as fun, but not with a aggressive undertone and human versus human kind of ideology. So that's really interesting. So I'm really excited about that. In terms of,
I 100% agree, but I want to chuck in a positive thing for team versus team games.
Yeah.
While they are PvP, one of the reasons why we wouldn't make those is there's so many good ones out there. Anyhow, that niche has been filled. But when you think about the positive aspects of team sport, you can have that in team games too. It's not just that you're fighting humans means like this game is inherently and morally bad. I definitely wouldn't say that. It's more this experience of cooperating together against shared adversity that isn't people, humans overcoming together. That's also good, but it's also not happening.
Yeah.
So it is this combination of being really interesting to us and being underserved in the market. I don't want to go around saying that I think PvP games are all terrible. There's some wonderful ones. It's just not the experience that I necessarily want to play all the time, and it's not the one that I wanted to make.
Totally. No, I respect that. It's not black and white, and there's plenty of room for all types of different experiences in games.
Exactly.
I'm interested to know if you guys have any clear strategies when it comes to being a games as a service, which you have said is very important for the success of a mobile game. So, for example, Path of Exile, I believe they do. No, not Path of Exile. Valorant and League of Legends at Riot Games, they have 2 weekly patch updates. Every 2 weeks, they launch a new patch with new assets, new content. Do you guys have any kind of hard and fast strategies about how you're going to be games as a service and what lessons you're hoping to bring to the company?
Yeah, I'll let Joe speak to this, because eventful games, as we sometimes say, that's his jam. So go, Joe.
Yeah, I love this word eventful. It's one of the words that Supercell uses to describe Brawl Stars. So there's a wide variety of ways that you can make games as a service, but the dream is every time you log into the game, there might be something going on that's a little bit different and a little bit surprising from what you've experienced. So in Brawl Stars, for example, they have a wide number of events that are on rotation. So there's a slot, this first slot, and it's always some form, or nearly always some form of this game where you collect gems and you attack. It's like team versus team, collecting gems, but you don't know where it's going to be played and what the gimmicks are on the map. And sometimes you show up and it's a holiday themed version of it, but there's going to be something different in that slot every 8 to 12 hours. So the game itself is built around eventfulness, a rotation of interesting content. In a PvP game, you get a lot of that variety from other players. Like they show up with different characters, and that changes the nature of your game experience, and so it can be heavily replayable.
Mm-hmm.
But that word, eventful, logging in and experiencing something different every time, that's what we strive for. But it is challenging. It's especially challenging when you get when you're creating a lot of content for people to move between. So how do you do that? With our current prototype, the way we're looking at doing it is by having a lot of different characters and making them easy and cheap to produce. And there being a certain degree of alchemy between you, your partner, and the environment. And for those 3 factors to bring something new. So what it means is we need to change up the environment in which you're interacting on a really frequent basis. So you have this core level of eventfulness that just percolates, and you have that every day. And then there's this, then there are games that have events, and events can have a wide range of kind of degrees of excitement. Some games just say like, hey, something's on special. That's an event, and
Mm-hmm.
it is a type of event. Others are like what we did in Samurai Siege. We spent 3 weeks working on a special Christmas event that had a story around one of the trolls dressing up in a Santa hat, but then he stole all of the presents and he needs to get them back. And there's this new presents currency in the game that you're earning slowly and building towards holiday statues that you can keep as a permanent reminder of the holiday season in your game. So there's a wide range of events that you could run, but what we want to do is this baseline eventfulness plus live operations events over the top, introducing new content. And then you can have what we call a content life cycle. So for example, it might be a character that's very difficult to earn in the game. Like it requires players to be dedicated throughout this weekend event, get into a good alliance, everyone work together, and then be one of the top 10 alliances in the world, and you'll be rewarded with this exclusive version of this character. And everyone who sees you using that character knows that it's a badge of honor, it's a trophy for what you've achieved. And that's cool. But that would be really wasteful if you were to make that one awesome character and that's all it could do. And so at some point in the game, it might become available in the pool, the rotation of character rewards that you can normally get for, say, premium currency or as a special reward for playing the game. So it moves through the life cycle of being super exclusive to just premium.
Yeah.
And then maybe another 6 months later, it just moves into the regular rotation. So it can be given out as a reward. So there's this fine balance of how you introduce content. What tier is it? How premium is it? How long should it stay at that point? But as a player who plays this game, you have this constant influx of new and interesting things that you know eventually you'll be able to have access to, whether you are the most dedicated player in the game or someone who it's like, hey, my daughter plays this game a lot. I just log in to play with her like on the weekend as something fun to do. She keeps chiding me about like how her collection is so much bigger than my one is, but like we play together and it's awesome. And she's like, wow, I can't believe you got that character. Like that character was so hard for me to get 6 months ago. That's amazing. So that's those are the sorts of experiences that we want people to have. And I'm talking about this in quite an abstract way, but it all boils down to like ensure there are things that people like about your game and want to experience and want to have. Figure out what they are, and then find interesting ways of giving them to players. Because everything else, there's all of the other apps, games, Netflix, playing sport, like there are so many things people could be doing with their time. And so if you're not actively trying to give people what they want in an interesting way, then they're not going to keep playing your game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it ties into storytelling as well. You want to create as many stories that the player can create. And like you're saying, your daughter brings up that story that she had of overcoming a really hard challenge. And that's really cool. And I love that you guys are aware of that going into the games that you create. Are you in development yet? I know you guys are hiring for a senior UI artist at the moment. So anyone listening, if you're interested or if you know anyone that's interested, please reach out to them. Is it 2upgames.com is your guys' website?
It's 2up, so
yep.
The numeral 2, UP, 2up.games.
Great.
That's it.
That's an awesome URL. Awesome. So are you planning, do you have any announcements in terms of when you're planning to launch a title, or is it just kind of 2022 as like a rough number? Or is this year something that you're planning on getting something out the door?
I will say we're planning on moving pretty fast, actually. Cool. Yeah, we think, Joe and I think a team shipping a game together, there's nothing like it to bring the team together to help you refine your processes, to especially to give you the feeling of like we are a team. We are a team that has shipped a game as a marvelous and very valuable thing. So yeah, looking to move pretty fast for our first product.
Out of
Should be this year. There's also this thing where it took us a long time to explain our particular brand of co-op, but if you play the prototype we have now for 2 minutes, then all of that is immediately apparent.
You kind of you just get it. So having something out and generally available as a great way to like stake our claim on the territory and be like, yeah, this is who we are, players and anyone looking to join the team. This is who we are. So that's what we're aiming for.
That's awesome. I want to ask who between the both of you is going to be working on the music of the game, because I'm sure it's both a shared interest. Or are you guys both gonna just shut the door on that and then hire someone else that can take ownership of that?
Yeah, ironically, I think it will be one of our musical friends. One of my roles within Magic Leap was in a technical audio role. So I'm pretty well connected with lots of great audio folks there, and Joe, I believe, as well has a lot of great contacts. So
yeah, it's like even if I was okay at doing it at one point, like this is creating music and audio for video games is a skill that needs to be kept incredibly sharp rather than rusty, and it would end up being amateur hour if I were to put my work into the game at the moment, unfortunately.
No, that's cool. No, I'm sure you have plenty of skills that you've accrued over your career that will be valuable. I wish I could go into more detail onto how you guys are going to use data to make these games, but we're kind of out of time now. So I'm hoping that maybe once you guys have launched your first title, I can talk to you guys in more detail about the exact game that you've created and why you've chosen to go in that direction, and how you guys are working on the game as it's live. I think that'll be really interesting to observe. But yeah, I just wanted to give a big thank you to you guys for coming onto the podcast today. If anyone's interested in reaching out, you can find them at 2up.games or at Joe Raeburn or Tim Knauf on LinkedIn. That's just their names. And yeah, they're hiring for new roles at the moment. So if you're interested, check them out, reach out to them, keep an eye out. And I believe they're hiring remotely as well. Is that right? So it's not just a certain city.
Yeah. So as mentioned, I'm in Wellington, Joe's in Auckland. Ironically, we've got like basically a pandemic proof company in a country where that's not currently required. But it's working pretty well for us. We can work with anyone in a compatible time zone. Really, it doesn't even have to be in New Zealand. We're talking to some nice folks in Australia and
cool.
And even West Coast of America, and
That's awesome.
So it's been quite beneficial so far.
Yeah, great. No, I really appreciate you guys coming out, and I hope once you guys release that you reach that hundreds of millions DAUs as your ambition would like to, and I think you guys understand the industry well enough to be able to align yourselves perfectly with that. So thank you so much for coming out, and all the best. Talk to you guys again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Look forward to hearing more episodes from your podcast.
Thank you. All right, take care.